Welcome, beautiful souls, for another episode of the Sacred Roots podcast. Today, we have the honor to have Seren Bertrand with us as an amazing guest. Thank you so much, Seren, for being here today.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here and excited to see what weaves in our conversation.
So, Seren, I like to give the opportunity to my guests to introduce themselves. And
Okay.
the signature of your email says Author and Incantrix.
Yes.
What is an Encantrix?
So an Encantrix means it's someone who brings magic through words and the vibration of communicating ideas from one realm to another. It can be a written word, and obviously in older times when people didn't tend to write, it was through the spoken word and through incantation. What I love about incantation, which is what an incantrix is incantation it lands somewhere between the spoken word, like the kind of conversation you have with your friends on the sofa.
Yeah.
and singing, really kind of powerful and incantation. And I think writing can carry this spirit of incantation. It's this medium, this mediumship. That's where the word medium comes from, to be a mediator or a medium between ideas and people or worlds. And so I am an author, and a writer by trade. I've been writing for 2 decades, but I'm an incantrix, and that means I love to play in this liminal realm where there is this magic that's greater than just like gossiping with your friends on the sofa or writing from that place, which can be fun too. But is more easy to embody and land than, say, like the power of sound, which just takes us completely out of the conscious thinking mind in any way.
Absolutely.
So and incantrix is the word that enchantress comes from, which of course has the word chant in it, which is connected to cant, incant, and of course is connected to cunt, which is
absolutely, yeah.
The word for, and cunning comes from this. And so the old English medicine people used to be called the cunning folk. Or like having knowledge of herbs was walk cunning, herbal gnosis. So that's why I use that word. There's kind of a lot in there, but I feel like it wraps it all up. And one of the things I love about the word Encantrix is that when you read medieval texts, what it tells you is that the people, the women specifically, that the priests were really all in a froth about trying to suppress were the Encantrix, because in a way they were in the same realm as the priest. They were weaving the feminine wisdom and this transmission and this vibration. They weren't just kind of like humble old ladies making herbs. They were out there incanting and storytelling and communicating myth. And so I think it's a great time for that archetype
to come back,
return to the world, not actually in opposition to the priest, but in as a complement, that our incantation, our voice, our word magic, our myths and our wisdom can find a place in this world. And I really feel like, even despite all the chaos, that is what is happening. This great stream of incantatory wisdom from the feminine is returning.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And so I guess this is not your first lifetime as an Encantrix.
Yeah, probably not.
And I love to look back on people's journey, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in people's stories, and that can also be very inspiring for my audience to know, when in your journey did you start realizing, oh, this is who I am. There's actually magic in the words that I use, and I can activate people through it? When did you really start realizing and owning that?
Well, from a very young age, I always wanted to be a writer. And I used to sit under my, mom's little dining room table as a really young girl, like 6, and write poems. And my mom was a working class poet. So she was really interested in words and language. My mom said that when she was pregnant with me, her and dad used to go to the library and like check out all the books on religion, all the great religious texts. And when I was a child, they read Charles Dickens to me, and they were great readers, which was really unusual because they were very working class people. They weren't educated people. And I think maybe one of the first times I realized that there was something different about me was at school, when I was maybe, let's think, probably 10 or 11. And we had a little writing project, and all the other kids, this is when you handwrite on all the other little kids wrote like, 1 or 2, 3 or 4 sides. And I wrote like 40 sheets. Well, it's a really complex story about, I think it was back in the day with Gorbachev and Russia and bridges that were being built from Russia to England and vampires. It was this whole world. The teacher was really kind of gobsmacked when she received it, and and they sent it home with me and my parents saying, you should just read this. And I think that was like the first moment specifically with words that I was like, okay, there's something different coming out of me. But I also remember at university when, in my first year, and I was kind of a complete hedonist, but what I used to do is I used to write my favorite words on pieces of paper and hide them in drawers and in between clothes and in pockets and everywhere. I would plant them. So if I was just kind of going through a drawer, like scrabbling for a pen, I would see a word like joy or, more complex, nuanced words that would speak to me. And actually a friend at university actually carried a little book with her that she wrote down the words that I used. That was part of her, she just loved my language. And so she had a little book, and she scribbled down all the words, all the kind of different words that I use. So I think from a young age, I knew that me and words had a destiny.
So beautiful. And so now you have written 3 books.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I've written a few more books than that, but 3 books on this subject. Yeah.
Oh, tell me, how many books have you written in total?
So 1, 2, maybe 6 now, I think.
Okay. I only know about Spirit Weaver, the Magdalene Mysteries, and Womb Awakening that we are going to talk about today.
Exactly, yeah. But I was a professional writer before writing those books. So I have written books, and I was also a person that publishing companies hired when writers had complete blackouts in the middle of books and couldn't finish them. I remember once a young male author coming round to my house in Highgate in London, and he was halfway through a book and he'd had just a complete this was like a big book, with a lot of money in a big publishing company, and he'd had a complete collapse and couldn't finish it. So they hired me, and he came round, sat on my little sofa, and I coached him in all the ways to try and finish it. And sometimes I would help them. I would co-write as well. So I just always just loved the worlds that words weave, and like what it takes to inhabit those worlds and really like stay with the energy.
Yeah. And so when did you know you were going to write a book about the womb? When it become evident?
Well, I've written this down before, but many people probably haven't read this. So I think the first time that I really knew this was I was in my late 20s, just after my Saturn's return, and Lady Saturn was really like kicking me up the butt with her stiletto. It was a really hard time.
I've also been through that.
Yeah. and I had endometriosis, and so this was what brought me down into my womb. I would have probably never gone there otherwise. And I was walking home from work. I was working as a writer on a big national magazine, was a lot of energy, and I had endometriosis, which anyone who's ever had it makes you really tired, and this was a point where I felt so tired. It's like this heaviness that I now kind of understand is power and ancestral power and calling. And when we first feel that heaviness, we feel like it's wrong because we live in a culture that demotes heaviness and promotes lightness, whereas the earth is a very heavy being. She's very gravitational. And I was walking home, and it was one of these like really rainy London nights, and I got big coat on, and I was so tired. I just didn't even know how I would put one foot in front of the other. And there was a big bookstore that I was walking past on my way home to the tube, and it was all brightly lit. And I just felt like I'm actually just going to collapse. So I'm just going to walk in here and just like kind of come back to myself a little bit. And as someone who loves words, libraries and bookshops are like restorative places for me. I just go and like stroke the books.
Have a nap.
I went inside. It was like the King's Cross Waterstones, which was a huge brand in England at that time. So it wasn't like a small quirky bookshop. It was just vast. And as soon as I got in there, it was like I felt like I was going to die or collapse. It was that essence that I now see as a spirit essence, and if you can breathe through it and trust that you're not actually going to die, you kind of start to go through the cervix of the experience. So I was just literally moved towards a bookshelf, like in this vast shop, and I picked a book out, and it was by Maya Tawari, a really incredible woman and author. And it was I can't remember the exact title of it now, the Ayurvedic Path of Self-Practice for Women. It was a book on women's healing and specifically the womb. And I picked it out, and it was like sparkles. And as soon as I touched that book, I heard a voice, and it was not even like, sometimes we have our inner voice or our inner intuition. This was not a voice like this. I felt like someone was on the loudspeaker in the shop, and the voice said, you will too write a book. And I kind of look around like it was speaking up, it's like, it's these kind of moments that you don't tell anyone from the mainstream world, or they'll think you're a nutter. So this big voice, almost like an angel, boomed out, and you will write a book like this. And in that moment, there was like a rush of energy, and this feeling I'd had that I was just gonna like lay on the floor and die, like I couldn't go on anymore, kind of shifted. And I went home with this book, and it's an amazing book, and like Womb Awakening, and I feel like in a way Womb Awakening is some kind of daughter of this book. It's so multi-layered. I read it again every 5 years, and I'm like, am I reading the same book? Yeah. This was not the book but when I read it when I was that age, what I picked up from it was the womb. She was talking about the womb, and she was talking about the moon and lunar consciousness and connecting your womb to the moon. She was also talking about the ancestral womb, and I don't think I was quite ready in that moment to go there. But for me, it completely changed in that moment this journey I'd been on with endometriosis, trying to heal my womb, from such a this place that like you're trying to fix a car, even though I was doing it the alternate ways, like with herbs and and I had a surgery as well that I hadn't worked, and I'd gone on to the natural path. But even for me, the natural path was missing this quality of the beingness of my, the intelligence, the aliveness, that she was a being who, in a way, I would have said lives inside me, and now I would say I live inside her. And so that was really, that for me was the big shift that gave me the language I needed. And I always hoped with Womb Awakening it would serve the same function for women, and be a medium of that reframe, that even in the most holistic circles, we're still working with ourselves as if this kind of car that needs to be fixed. And it's like, okay, I won't use these pharmaceuticals, but I'll use the herbs like a pharmaceutical. And then that just triggered my own experience. Like, it was almost like once I began, it's like once I'd lifted the lid off Pandora's box, it's like I couldn't stop, it just came through really fast, and that's why it's called Womb Awakening, because there's so many aspects of the womb. There's like womb wisdom, this kind of ancestral knowledge we carry inside us. There's womb healing, all the ways we can work with holistic modalities, which is really beautiful too. But for me, it was an awakening, but it wasn't awakening like anyone else I knew was having or talking about, because everyone else were having these like angelic awakenings or crown awakenings, or talking about ascended masters. Like down in there in my womb with the Divine Mother and the ancestors and the moon. And I even remember down to at that time when I had endometriosis, if you went to a nutritionist or you went to any kind of healing, or Googled what you should eat to heal your womb and endometriosis, it was all very much like an Ayurvedic lens. So they were saying eat rice and eat lentils and and when I ate that, my body just went and my womb was just like, because I had been on and off vegetarian, she was just, give me meat. She's like, so all these things were happening that I didn't see reflected around me, but the power was so strong. It was so like you just found your star. And that star is so beautiful and so bright and so rooted and so wise and so trustworthy, that even if everyone else around you seems to be doing something completely different, for me, that primary relationship then was forged. And I actually started writing a book straight away about womb healing. I got to about 40,000 words, and then I never finished it. And I think because I just needed to go through more of my own journey. And then when it finally did come through, it was something vaster that more reflective of the fullness of the journey.
Yeah, I feel like for women that are on their journey of reconnecting with their womb, at first they might feel called to reconnect with their womb because of their menstruation and then birth. And then we realize, oh, the moon is actually also connected to the womb. And then the deeper we go, the more we realize, oh, the womb is much more than just menstruation, birth, and the moon.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It's, well, I think that what we can say is the way that it's always been presented is that there is the world and all the religions and traditions of the world, and then there's just this little thing which is like women's stuff. And that's how it's treated. And then when you reframe it, you understand that the feminine, the womb, births the world, births the universe, births all humanity, is the creative force that everything comes out of. And then you see, and again, it's another reframe, because then the womb becomes the container that's holding all the other traditions. It's not this small thing, you know. And then I do think then in part of that, a person in a female body with a womb experiencing menstruation, that is a part inside that greater container. But what I've always loved is that greater container holds everything. You know, the universe is a womb.
Yeah, you also talk about the wombiverse.
Yeah, the earth is a womb. You know, she's always been referred to as a goddess, which really its roots is talking about a womb force, a primeval womb force, you know, that grows things. And you know, and I think another part of that mystery of the womb is that we live in a world that makes the light and the dark as adversaries. But in the old traditions, the light and the dark are consorts and great lovers, because without the sun, there would be no light and life. And traditionally, the earth or the womb is the dark yin space that grows the light, is impregnated by the light, but grows what the light codes into it. So there's this kind of incredible symbiotic relationship. So for me, it feels like, you know, one thing is the experience of someone in a female body with a womb, or not with a womb, you know, who's had a hysterectomy, but all these practical things. But then there's this greater cosmology as well, which for me is what lifts it and expands it to a different level.
And also something that you touch upon in your book, and that is still, I think, a little bit taboo, but I like to address taboo topics, is how the womb is really a portal to source, and how through sacred sexuality, we can actually access source much faster than through hours of meditation, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, it's like anything, isn't it? It's sex can be magical or sacred, and it cannot be as well.
It's true,
like so many things. But and the way I kind of think about it, and the way I, you know, when I began on this journey, I was single and celibate in a period of conscious celibacy, you know. After having like I remember the last sexual encounter I had before I went into conscious celibacy, and it was perfect because there wasn't anything harmful. It was just utterly boring and devoid of any magic. And I just remember afterwards thinking, is like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, this is because, and I'm sure a lot of women out there might respond to this. And, you know, now we live in a world where there's a lot more magical energy, even in men, but back then there wasn't. So as a magical woman, you had to kind of like wade into the muggle man world. And for me, it was like, okay, enough, you know, it's like, I want this magical experience, and I have to seal the container to experience it within myself. And so I think that's really always what I say when we think of sexuality. Our minds always leap to, you know, what happens between two people, but for me the root of it is actually what happens inside yourself. It's like a dimension that you inhabit, and I think a lot of the old female Christian mystics inhabited that. And I write about that in Spirit Weaver, especially with Teresa de Avila and some of her mystical experiences, which are clearly erotic, clearly erotic mystical experiences. And the way that they always frame Jesus as a lover, they were having this kind of erotic, passionate, devotional connection, but in themselves. And so I think when you inhabit that dimension, it's like anything you do is coded with that. And of course, then if you meet someone who can hold that energy, hold the sacredness and sanctity and wildness of that energy, then of course it's amplified, because we read that in all alchemy, it's one of the blueprints of life, when two energies come together and in an alchemical union where they're meeting or matching each other, then a third energy field is born. And in a way, it's that energy field is a portal, and we have a portal in us. We don't need another person for a portal. We all have this portal, but if you've really opened that portal, and then you meet someone who has that portal open, or you can open it for them, which again was traditionally one of the roles of women. They were not just portals, they were keys to portals. And those portals unite, you create a third, which is called the divine child, but really is like a alchemical embryo of magic. And that starts to create a very intense portal, which can connect us to source, gnosis, magic, alchemy, all of these juicy worlds. So
it makes me think of Horus, the divine child of Isis and Osiris, and it's known that Isis had a lot of sacred sexual practices and all of that, and it's all very ancient, very magical.
Yes, and really these practices are just to open our body to the magic that's inherent within our body. It's
biomancy,
it's biomancy, exactly. It's biogelic. And for those of you who, Azra, who was the co-author of Womb Awakening, he's working on something called biomancy that we co-vision together, and really because we wanted a deeper language for this. And then there's this concept of biodelics, which is when you have opened that magic in your body, and you can reach these mystical, ecstatic, psychedelic, visionary states, and then integrate them. And that if actually you can do it through your own body, it's the most organic, magical way of doing it, that's the most easy to integrate in your life. And so I think Womb Awakening is biomantic, it's body magic, even the way that, for me, seeing the womb as a divinity just shifts everything, and the whole body is a divinity. And and when we honor this divinity and open it and court it and romance it and fall in love with it. So I think that was what changed in my path, when I was single for 10 barren years, not finding that quality of love. And I think that part of it was because I was looking for someone else to bring that magic to me. And I was seeing the magic that I felt I perceived in people in love, and feeling like, well, when I fall in love, I'll have access to that magic. And then understanding, no, the magic is in me. I kind of, and it's a lot, people talk about self-love, and that never really lands for me. I don't really understand what it means. And I don't think you can ever really fully love yourself. I don't think that's a human quality we have. I think we're beings that are always doubting ourselves, and all these things. I think that's natural. So I don't think it's about having a perfect self-love. It's about just falling in love with being you in your body, and seeing your life as a magical romance, even if it's like not a perfect romance, you know, but it's energizing yourself with that divinity and that love and that romance. And then it just becomes easier for that to find you.
Yeah, it's about falling in love with being perfectly imperfect.
Yeah, exactly. And being heartbroken when you're heartbroken.
And that's okay.
You know, and with no reason, not needing to be heartbroken over an external person, but just, you know, all these, love is always charged with this energy and emotion. And that's why, you know, like more masculine paradigms have talked us away from love, away from the body, away from femininity, away from sex, because they're all such highly charged energies. So in a way, on a feminine path, we embrace that and we open it, and we ride the energy. That's the aim in the end, is to ride the energy, to ride actually the highs and lows like you're riding a dragon. You know, it doesn't matter that you've gone low, just don't fall off.
Stay on the dragon.
You're just like holding on to a claw. But it's like, I think that's the kind of energy. So there is something really romantic and playful and mystical, and it's like a pilgrimage and an adventure. It's not being sat in a monastery on your own, devoid of emotion or desire.
Yeah.
And I'm not negating that, because one of the ways I feel like is we all hold down different threads, and that maybe those very very zen, you know, men on the mountaintop are holding part of the balance for us. Absolutely. And we have to hold our threads of the balance too. It's like they be them and us be us, and together hold a balance, you know.
Exactly. So what really was fascinating for me is that when I read the Magdalene Mysteries and Womb Awakening, the second time that I read it, like you said, I discovered so many more things that I was finally ready to see and to learn in this beautiful book. What became really clear and that I wasn't aware of is how actually all religions years ago were womb religions,
all
feminine religions.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then patriarchy arrived, and we know the story. Now, thank God, people like you are bringing her story out, and we can remember all that power of our womb. But I would love to talk a little bit about the mystery behind the mermaids and how they were womb priestesses. And because it's such a mystical persona, mythical persona that we hear about. What are the mermaids really?
Well, that's a big question. That's another book, isn't it? I think I would just start from the place of, you know, we're so fascinated with mermaids, you know, as children even. It's like there's something about mermaids that there's so many magical creatures or, you know, archetypes in the world, but mermaids really capture us. And as a young girl, I spent a lot of my holidays on the Cornish coast and the northeast coast, the Yorkshire coast, where there are lots of legends of mermaids, and they always fascinated me. And there's this liminal way that the way that legends of mermaids are presented, especially if you're in a place that's held that myth for a long time, is it's never quite clear if they were real women or not. It's like it's just kind of left hanging. Whereas I think, you know, like looking back, you know, looking at some of the sites in Cornwall where and Yorkshire, there's a lot of also myth around giantesses, but it feels clear that you don't think, oh, were they real women? You know, you feel clear that whatever that means, it's something not like a human woman. And so it was this sense of like a human woman, a real woman, a woman who fell in love, but a woman who lived in the sea half of the time, and a woman who was enchanting, a woman who laid on rocks and sang and lured like men to her or to the sea. And so that that motif of the mermaid is either she enchants or seduces men to come into her dimension in the sea, or she leaves the sea to go in their dimension and to become, you know, usually a mother, you know. And so there's the famous, like the Selkie skin. She leaves her mer body or her mer costume behind. And for me, I see those myths or those motifs not as a man versus woman, but as a feminine consciousness versus consensual reality consciousness, and an acknowledgement that women have this power to live in two worlds and to bridge two worlds. And that women are essentially, you know, the word that we've kind of conjured up in this modern era of shamanic. They are shamans of dimensions naturally. And again, the motifs of these myths are that they fall in love with mortal men. And it's interesting because in the Bible we have this motif of like male angels falling in love with human women, and I often find that those stories are often inverted of the really old stories. So we see in the old stories it was actually the magical women who fell in love with the mortal men and left their realm. And it's interesting how in those motifs it's like when a woman is making a home and having a child, there's a way that somehow she has to choose between that magical dimension and the more mundane realm. And then eventually she can't stand it anymore and she returns to the ocean. And so I think just as a mythic motif, it speaks so deeply to us. And I feel that actually one of the inheritances of the mermaids that we're trying as women to inhabit is that we can have access to both, that it's not a choice, because I feel like maybe some of these stories are reflecting that at some point women had to choose between their magic and their vision in inhabiting these visionary dimensions and the world of motherhood and love and the home and the domestic. And so then this kind of takes us back to a lineage. So there are lots of mermaids all around the world. Africa has huge traditions of mermaids, Europe does. But then that takes us back to Sumeria, where we know that they had mermaid priests and priestesses. And so for me, this brings up this idea that, you know, we will write about this in the Magdalene Mysteries. At that point, you have these codified priestesses living in temples who are carrying the Mer lineage, you know, Mer meaning the mother, the holy waters, the quantum magic of water, the shamanic feminine, you know, magic. And them encoding that lineage, you know, that the grail or, you know, the cup of, you know, the sacred waters is part of it that Mary Magdalene inherited. So my vision, my take on the stories, you know, not from an academic point of view, but from a feeling in my body.
Intuitive.
Is that when so we really have in the Sumerian lineages, this evidence that they were women. They were holy women. Whereas when you look at the other mythic mermaids in Europe, there's this question: are they real women? Are they just myths? So when we go to Sumeria, we see, no, they were really real women. They were holy women. They could inhabit the oceanic consciousness of, in quantum, like we have the particle and the wave. They literally could inhabit the wave and the particle, right? They were quantum magicians. But when you look at that story, they were kind of held in these temples that to me are like towers. Because they didn't often have children, or there was no domestic life, And so I often see this story as a metaphor that we see in the British or the European traditions, where the mermaid, and she carries all the signatures of the priestesses. She's always very beautiful, very enchanting. She has a lyre or a harp. She works with sound medicine. She can kind of change reality. She's combing her hair, which was a sign of the goddess. And this is a huge motif in Irish fairy women and banshee tradition. So the banshee is the fairy woman, is literally completely holding this archetype. And that at some point, women, the whole woman, the whole magical woman was broken down. And so you got the magical woman in the temples, and then the mundane woman in the homes. And so for me, the call of the mermaid is not actually to go back to the temples, it's to unite these two realms. And so what I really love about the Mary Magdalene story, and of course we'll never know the actual truth, we'll never know. There's not enough evidence, there's conflicting evidence. We all bring so much of our own baggage into it and our own desires. But for me, the way I look at things is, if this was a fairy tale, right? So for me, the story of Mary Magdalene and Yeshua is, if this was a fairy tale, And for me, it's that she inherited this legacy of the mermaids, of the magical liminal woman that she had learnt about in temple situations. And she actually chose to leave, to come out of the ocean and to marry her fisherman. Right, Jesus. And to have a child, and to have this love, right? And so in my fairy tale with them, they actually, in the end, they leave even, their homelands, and they do almost become like these mythic, Brythonic, or, in France, where they're living this simple life where, he's a fisherman, and they're, bathing in the holy waters. They've got a child, but she takes her magic with her. There's not a split. She takes her magic with her, and actually her fisherman has not stolen her selkie skin. Her fisherman is a guardian of her selkie skin. And then to me, they start a new lineage of mermaid magic, which gives us the possibility of the whole experience for those who choose it, and for some, everyone is more attracted to different things. So there's no right or wrong, but, and then for me, that was the thread I've taken into Spirit Weaver, and I'll continue, as like, how, in the same way of how can we make these bodies magical, right? I don't want to be ascending on a cloud to some, I want to be descending into the magical divinity that I inhabit. And then in the same way in our lives, I don't want to be a priestess. I don't want to live in a temple. I don't want to go back in time. Right. And neither do I want to live in a like a drudgery, mundane world where all my magic as a woman has been taken from me, and I'm just some kind of like domestic, I don't know, you know, domestic housekeeper or breeder or child rearer. And then for me, the very exciting thing that this fairy tale brings to us is then we can explore, well, we have this innate magic, we have this like womb religion magic, this cosmic magic. It's ours. It's like, it's with us before we arrive here. It's with us here. We'll take it with us. But it asks us, how can we live a magical way in our relationships, in our home, with the food we grow and eat, with our relationship with nature, to the way we have you know, sexual intimacy with each other, to the way that we conceive our children and birth our children and raise our children. Because if we've stripped all of that of feminine magic, then we're going to enter the wasteland that we have entered. And that was great to return to these mythic, well, they're not mythic, these actual what's the word for it, historical, like temple priestesses, so we can get the codes. We can remember we are ocean dwellers. We are quantum magicians who can ride the wave and the particle. we're shapeshifters, you know. And but then we kind of go to this fairy tale thing of like, let's weave this this water magic, this ocean of consciousness, with what it takes to live a real life on land and build a home and build relationships and build a world where we don't have to abandon our children or our love in order to reclaim our magic. We can integrate it. And so for me, that's the exciting part of the motif of this story and where this story is leading us to.
Absolutely. And it really becomes a both and story. And we can really see it everywhere in the collective, how the Christ consciousness and all these stories are really, you know, coming out of the ground, and people are talking about all of that more and more, because we are all invited to be humans and spiritual beings. And not just 50-50 of each, but 100 each, both at the same time. And that's where we can remember our magic and talk about nail polish, and then about our past life, and then about our dharma, and then just really be both. And there's a lot of beauty and empowerment and healing in that. And I think it's no wonder that your book is having such a huge success, because people are really craving that and needing that, and their souls are really seeking these kinds of information so that they can be more embodied as well.
And you know, one thing that I just want to kind of pull into the mix, because I'm also completely fascinated by the temple frequency too, not as something that we leave our worlds to inhabit, but that's something that we bring into our habit, into our world. Because one thing I was always fascinated with you know, the priestesses of like Hathor and Isis, but you know, for me, I almost see the priestesses of Isis more you know, more with they were the priestesses of lamentation and ritual, but the priestesses of Hathor, you know, that she is this kind of really you know, where the doulas went, where the midwives went, and where they worked with sacred scents and sacred touch, you know, like basically massages, facial, sound, incense. And I feel like this is something that I think women are really craving, and especially to bring into our homes and our communities, these mer rituals of renewal. And I think that also it's good to go on retreat if you can do that, you know, to be able to go to the ocean or go somewhere where you can experience that. But for a lot of us, and especially as mothers, that's not really. So I would love to see a world where we bring that kind of sense of beauty. And it's I've talked about this in Feminine Magic. It's like these feminine arts are devalued as like luxury or pampering or vanity or self-indulgence, whereas actually they are restorative. They heal our immune systems.
And I think that's why they are criticized so much.
Yes, they strengthen our feminine body, right? Because the part of the body that can just keep on going and keep on pushing and running on adrenaline, it's like these feminine magic rituals go all the way down into our feminine body, into our lymph, into our immune system, into our mitochondria, and renew us. So we're very strong in our feminine body. And this is what we need as women, and this is what we really need as mothers. I think this is completely missing for mothers who go through this really intense experience, not just emotionally and spiritually, but bioenergetically and physically, and living cultures and worlds where we don't have that. And even like 100 years ago in lots of communities, things like hot baths and steams, and these were more commonplace. We've kind of totally lost this sense of creating a temple in our own home, not just for us, but for everyone, so that everyone can renew. And so yeah, I think there are all these magic keys from these ancient paths that are asking to be brought into our everyday world, and also to be restored, so we understand their benefits from a psychological, spiritual, bioenergetic, and a well-being perspective. Because I think, part of the wasteland is we don't understand the feminine body of ourselves or Earth, and then we deplete it, and ravage it, and it loses its ability to renew. And so I think one of the other keys of the mermaids, as well as shape shifting between, is this key of resurrection and renewal, and the knowledge of how, like, the immortality within our own cells and body, that we are created as regenerative beings, but the culture has made us into degenerative beings, and I think we're seeing this in our world right now. There's a point where that degeneration starts to accelerate and become unsustainable. And I feel like, so in a way, I think mermaids are very sustainable. they actually are the secret of how we can sustain ourselves and live sustainably, which means accessing this core regenerative magic in our bodies, in our energy systems, and with Earth.
And I also think it's important to create space, like you said, as mothers, so that we can restore, regenerate, sit in silence, because it's when we are in that space that we come back to the 0 point, and where we receive guidance from our soul, from our ancestors, from all of life that is actually supporting us. But when we are degenerating ourselves and being so busy, we disconnect and slowly just lose ourselves, really.
It reminds me of a time in my life. This is when I was having my first womb awakening, and I was feeling really bad in my body, with endometriosis, and I really didn't have any money at the time either. So, I couldn't just put myself into a fancy spa and heal. I was like, I really felt like I was in this crunch. And I remember this amazing thing. I was just starting out on my writing career, and I was commissioned to write about a practice called Seiki, which comes from the Japanese traditions, a weave of shiatsu and Shinto. And I had this amazing session with this woman, and I had never done things like that before, because I would never pay for that kind of thing. I would do yoga classes because they were affordable for me, but to, do a thing. And I just fell in love, and it was a huge part of that womb awakening and the principles of Seiki, which was very feminine. But one of the things that was the most amazing thing is that as part of that, as that community kind of welcomed me into it, once a week they hired a big hall in North London, and there were maybe 30 people, and you all had to pay a few pounds just to cover the rental of the place. And we all went in and we practiced Seiki on each other. And anyone who's done my work knows I've used that model. So we would have, say there were 30 of us, we would have like groups of 4. And for them, it was like they were practicing Seiki. They were all like devotees in essence, often shiatsu practitioners who wanted to learn this kind of magical, mythical new technique that was very hard to pin down. But for me, it was amazing. It was like one night a week for just a couple of pounds. Okay. We just worked on each other's bodies for like 2 or 3 hours, and then sat around with like cups of tea that we bought in flasks. And it was just so magical. And I remember how it was is like when they were working on you and there were 3 people working on you, was just like magic, pure magic. And then even when you worked on them, one of the principles of Seiki is for it to feel good for anyone else, it should feel good to you, right? Because it's a two-way current. So even when then it was your turn you were still in this, like, so, at the end of the hours, everyone was like radiant and shining and soft and in their hearts. And, that was so healing. And so I really feel like as mothers and in communities, separate from like healing and healing businesses, which I think are really valuable too, it's like we should be able, and it's not just women, it can be men. It's like, rather than these things like, oh, we'll have a barbecue, or we'll go for a hike, or we'll go for a meal, why don't we all get around and give each other foot baths, magic, and and chant. And I would love to see that magic come back. And you see, I study the Irish singing tradition, and even when you look at those traditions not that long ago, 100 years ago, they were singing as they worked. They were singing in their home. And there is a spiritual context to it, but there's a really practical context to it, is that sound energizes. Sound shifts time, right? So when the fisher women were sat round, working, repairing the nets for hours, or weaving, or in the home, they would have all these songs that would bring that feminine regenerative magic back to their lives and enchant their world, actually at a very deep spiritual level, but really at a biomantic, bioenergetic level. So I think we have so much potential of what we can do actually quite easily once we know the whys and the hows.
Absolutely. So beautiful. It reminded me of my 20s when I would go to parties and then I would have to drive home, and it's late in the night or early in the morning and I'm tired and I have to drive. And I would actually sing in the car to keep myself awake. It would give me energy. It would make the time go faster. And I would also stay focused on the road. By the tiredness. So there's so much magic in music and in singing.
So much. It reminds me actually of a story when Orphea, our daughter, was 10 months old. She broke a toe. A really heavy object fell on it. It's just at that stage where they learn to pull up. Anyway, everything else was locked down, but there was this one thing. It was actually a big pink crystal bowl that we used in womb rituals. So, and we took her to we had to take her to A&E, and we were in the room, and the doctor needed to do a few stitches, you know, and on obviously a young baby, you don't want to use any painkillers, and in that way it wasn't that severe to need that. So there was Azra and I, and there was a doctor and a nurse, and as he was kind of doing it all, me and Azra started to chant that really like a low Tibetan kind of because it's a really like rooting sound. And it was so funny because these were complete, like, you know, like mainstream doctors. The doctor and the nurse started to do it. So they were doing this little procedure, and all four of us, and then you can imagine the sound vibration, because there's 2 women and 2 men going like, and then at the end when it was done, it was like the doctor and the nurse kind of came out of a trance, so they kind of walked out of that room
what
like,
just happened?
like, what just happened? Like, I'm not telling anyone about that.
It'll stay a little secret between us.
Yeah. But you know, just simple ways like that, where you can use these, like this quick shift into this feminine consciousness to change the energy, change the vibration, energize yourself, renew yourself, or to settle, you know, to settle your nervous system down. And I think that we don't often reach for it. It's like, you know, if we've had anything bad happen, we're like, you know, we're upset, we want to call a friend, or we want to kind of complain to someone, or, you know, we go to all these things, and we don't think to just think, could I just make a sound even for 5 minutes? You know, that could bring me back. And then of course the promise of the mermaids is that over time, that sound, when you become like a mistress of it, you can actually shape reality in a really profound way with the feminine arts.
And I, you know, to bring back the connection between singing and womb, because maybe some of our audience doesn't see that. In your book, you're beautifully explaining how the word womb actually come from the old sound whore, that women were making when they were giving birth.
Yeah, exactly.
And how most of our language comes actually from sounds that we were naturally making. And so naturally, our body knows the right sounds to do to connect with certain parts of our.
Exactly. And I love that, how different sound signatures, you know, take you into different parts of your body, and also give you information about a tradition. It's like, you know, say the Tibetan tradition, which we often think of as you know, quite esoteric. It's totally a womb religion, you know, founded on magical women, you know, and that's why a lot of their chanting has got that very womby, it's like very earth womb related, because that's the portal which then they go and do their magic through.
And so to wrap up this beautiful interview, I feel like we could talk for 11, 12 more hours, Seren, but we're going to wrap up at some point. I'm sure Orphea is looking for you. My baby's definitely crying for me. I can hear him from far. What would you invite our listeners to do if they want to connect with their womb? Definitely they could sing those very deep sounds like we were saying, but would there be another practice or something that you invite your audience to do when they want to awaken their womb?
Well, you know, I can just share what I do. And for me, the womb is a centralizing, integrating force. So whenever you're feeling disintegrated, fragmented, scattered, stressed, all the words that this world kind of puts on us, the first thing is just to put your hands on your womb, just to make physical contact, or sometimes to put your hand on your heart and your womb. And I find that connection really, and I sometimes do it. You can do it to other places, like putting your hand on your womb, but your hand on the altar major or even the crown. So you connect your womb to different places. If I'm near nature and it's a good day, literally just laying face down on the earth with your womb in the earth, and again making that connection between your womb and the earth womb. I'm a big tea drinker, so me just
too.
even boiling, I make tea in a pot of herbs on my thing. So even just taking 5 minutes, boiling the herbs, and then when you sit down, as you drink the tea, again putting your hand on your womb. So making it a reconnected action. And sounding or singing, one of the things I notice for myself is that when I have blocks in my throat, it means that I've come out of that connection with my womb. And that's just valuable information. If I sit and I think, well, I'm going to sound or sing, I know it's very healing and I don't want to. It's like it doesn't naturally come out of me. I don't really try and change that. It's just information that actually I need to come back into my center and my roots, even for that flower of the voice to feel safe, to open into the world. And I do things. I love cacao, and if I drink cacao, I often just actually take the cacao and I rub it on my heart and on my womb as well. So just anything where you can make that physical connection, and bring that busy thinking mind, down to the heart, down back to your feelings, and then down even further to your root or your source or your foundation, which is what can hold the feelings. Because, one of the things that I found really important about, the womb is we're often encouraged to come into our heart. But when you really come into your heart, often there's so many big feelings there and it's overwhelming. But actually, when we come down into this foundation, this root of our body, she has like that power and wisdom to hold and constellate our feelings so that they can be our allies, not our enemies. And I think that's a big thing for women or the feminine, to harness this big feeling energy that we've got and make it something that works in our favor and not against us.
So beautiful. We now have so many tools. Tomorrow, when I have my cup of tea, Seren, I'm going to think about you, connect with my womb. I'll put some on my womb. I love that idea, to put it on the skin of the heart.
Yeah. And I even do it, sometimes. I really didn't watch TV for like 10 years during the whole womb awakening thing. But after I had Orphea, I did start to watch a few Netflix shows. And I sometimes do, when I'm really like deadbeat tired and it's just the sofa at night and there's kind of, you know what, I do it with that too. If I'm watching it, I put my hand on my heart or my womb. So that, and I think that's really important. That we're not kind of creating this like separate, rarefied, purified spiritual world that doesn't mesh with our everyday messy, chaotic self. That we can be feeling tired and overwhelmed and watching Netflix, and we can still make that connection, and actually then even that can become a healing, restorative feeling. And often what I sense is I feel the minute like, oh, now I'm back in my body. Now I feel at home, and then I might not even need to what, then I just want to go on and do something else. So I think that's in a way the thing I would say for people most. Let's not make this another religion, another puritanical religion, where we have to be the perfect da-di-das. This is not. The womb is like, she sees all of you. She sees and knows and holds and loves your most messy self. So don't like make her separate from that, because she's holding it, she's there for that. So I think that's, for me, a really important part of it.
What beautiful words of wisdom to finish our interview. Thank you so much, Seren. And so
Thank you.
Your audiobook, Womb Awakening, is coming out. So for any of you who have loved this conversation, you can get the audiobook. There's, of course, the normal book.
The normal book and the audio book, yeah.
That I would actually invite everyone that's listening to get, because you can go back to that book over and over and over again. Thank you so much, Seren, for your time, your wisdom, and everything you've shared with us today. It was so much fun to have you on the Sacred Roots.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's been so much fun to chat about this stuff.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.